Hello and welcome to this special interview. We have with us Mr. Dominic Strauss-Kahn, who's the Managing Director of the IMF. And it is in your hands, right, to save the global financial system from collapsing, which it's been threatening to do now for, what, 3 years, off and on?
Well, I won't say it's only in my hand or in the hand of the IMF, but we're certainly part of the system trying to help. Certainly we succeed with the countries to avoid a crisis that could have been as big as the Great Depression. We have a crisis, we're still in the aftermath of this crisis, but certainly we avoided something which could have been much more severe.
So you think, but is it too early to say that we've averted the worst of it because you keep hearing about fresh crises emerging every second day? So
well, you never know about the worst. Certainly the climax of the crisis is behind us, and growth is coming back almost everywhere in the world, but in Europe, where still the recovery is sluggish. So on one hand, you may say, well, it's only a quarter of the global economy, I mean the European Union. So if growth is going well in Asia, and that's obviously the case, in Latin America and elsewhere, and not that bad in the US, it's fine. On the other hand, we are now clearly in a globalized economy, so what happens somewhere may have consequences on the rest of the world. So until growth will really come back everywhere, we won't be out of the woods.
So, I'll come back to the global economy in just a couple of minutes, but I just want to touch on India. And when you come here, when you come to India, do you see this as one of the bright spots in the global economy, or is the story overplayed a little bit right now?
No, it's certainly one of the success story of the global economy. And the result of the Indian economy are really, really bright. Of course, there may have been some downside risk. Growth is going very fast, maybe too fast, so you may have some risk of overheating in terms of inflation, in terms of a current account deficit, and the government is clearly aware of that and managing that. But if you take the broad picture, clearly what's happening in India is good, not only for the Indian people, but also for the global economy.
I just want to expand on those two issues that you touched upon, the potential problems. India is growing very fast, that's great. But as you yourself said, the risk of inflation, which is politically very sensitive out here, you think that's very much there? Do we need to press the brakes or not at this stage?
Well, inflation is rather high, not being huge, but rather high. And I think the policy which has been put in place by the Reserve Bank of India is the right one so far, including managing the interest rate and trying to cool down. So it's just understandable that in such a fast-growing economy, you may have a pressure on the prices upward. It's a concern. I'm not saying that it's a problem, but it's a concern. And I think that the government is clearly aware of that. So I'm not afraid until it remains under control.
The other issue which you touched on, the current account deficit, and that would be something which would worry many people, especially if there's an external shock. And let's say the price of oil was to spike for some reason to 120, 130 again. It's all very well for India to be a source of demand, and that's great for the rest of the global economy. But if you do have an external shock, then the possibility of a current account crisis in India can't entirely be ruled out.
Well, it's right to be probably not worried, but concerned about that. On the other hand, it's absolutely normal for a fast-growing, emerging economy to have a deficit of this size.
Unless you're China.
Well, China is a very special case, and China has other kind of problems that India may not have. So, it's a different kind of economy. But you're right in saying that if you're looking forward and saying we may have some kind of a commodity prices crisis, oil for instance, then you're less resilient when you have this kind of external deficit. That's true. That's why I say the government has to take care not to go too fast. Probably today growth is over potential. The output gap has been totally narrowed to zero, and it's probably time to just manage growth as it is and avoiding going faster and faster.